I'm Rob from the Malt Miller. Every so often we have a piece of equipment that comes along and it pushes the hobby of homebrewing forward, and the Grainfather electric grain mill is going to be one of those products. So as you'll know, at the Malt Miller we provide our complete range of grain as either whole malt or crushed malt. Now, because we're able to offer all of our malts as whole malts to our customers, this product will allow our customers to be able to mill malt fresh at home. This will allow you as the customer to replicate what we do here at the Malt Miller. Okay, so having a malt mill at home as a home brewer will allow you to crush your malt fresh on the day of your actual brew. You'll be able to buy a greater selection of malt, and whole malt keeps fresher for much longer at ambient temperature than crushed malt does. It also allows you to buy your base malts in a greater quantity. That allows you to buy malt at a cheaper price. You can buy in 25 kilo sacks, safe in the knowledge that you know that your grain is going to keep fresher. So we see a huge advantage of you milling your malt at home. One of the biggest ones is you can dial in the crush of the malt to suit your specific system. Now, you may be brewing using a bag, brewing a bag style. You may be brewing on a Grainfather or other single vessel system, or you may be brewing on a 3-vessel system. Now, for each of these, we may well see a different crush size is employed for each different method. Having a grain mill at home will allow you to dial in your crush size to exactly suit your brewing system. So let's talk about the crush size of the actual malt itself. Let's go right back to basics. So we are crushing the malt to allow your mash liquor to be able to dissolve the sugars that are contained within the grains. The husk of the grain plays a really important role in the mashing of the beer. It acts as a filter to stop you having a stuck mash. Now, the size of the grain crush will vary depending on what system you're brewing on. Because you're not worried so much about a stuck mash if you're brewing the bag style, you can crush the malt finer, and this will take up some of the lack of efficiency that you do get with a brew in a bag system. So you can crush the malt finer if you are using a brew in a bag. Conversely, if you're using a Grainfather or a single vessel system, you need it to be a little bit coarser to allow good filtration and lautering of the mash. There's much talk about setting the gap on the rollers to a certain size, and that's a bit of a myth that we need to dispel completely here. The grains vary in size greatly. Base malts tend to be plumper than, or they're definitely plumper than something without a husk on it. So huskless grains such as rye and wheat will need the rollers to be closer together than something like a Maris Otter or a Pilsner malt. With that in mind, it's really important when you're milling malt that you don't mill a complete recipe. You mill the individual malts separately. So if you've got a grist that includes malted barley and malted wheat, they will need to go through the mill on different settings. The speed of the rollers on the mill is really very important. Now, this mill comes with an adjustable speed. You can adjust the speed setting of the rollers. We've done lots of experimenting with this mill, and actually the speed setting that you need to have it on is 4. It goes faster, but that is detrimental to the crush. If it goes through too fast, it actually pulverizes the malt and pulverizes the husks of the grain, which is actually not what we want at all. So leave it on speed setting 4, and that's the best speed for milling the malt. With this particular Grainfather electric malt mill, it's recommended that it runs for a maximum of 6 minutes. Now in that 6 minutes, you should be able to mill about 10 kilos of malt. So actually using the mill is a piece of cake. We can top the hopper up completely with the mill turned off. Pop the mill on. Okay, so here we've got 3 different examples of crush settings on the Grainfather electric malt mill. This here is on setting number 10, and this is all Marisotta base malt here. Now this is setting number 10. They're not crushed at all, so they don't actually break in your fingers when you try to crush them. This example here is on setting number 6. Now this is the correct setting for base malts to go through the mill. As you can see, the husks are as whole as possible, and actually the grains that look as if they're whole break in your fingers nice and easily. So we've kept the husks as whole as possible, which aids filtration, and it's crushed fine enough so that the sugars within the grain can be dissolved by your mash liquor. This third selection here is crushed too fine definitely for a 3 vessel or a 1 pot system. You may well get away with it on a brew in the bag system, but you can see here that there are next to no whole husks left, and it will create a stuck mash. So this selection here is crushed on setting number 1 on the mill. So to set up any malt mill, we use what's called a grist separation box. So we take a representative sample of milled malt, we put it in the box, and we shake the box in a special way, and then that will actually separate out the coarse, the fine, and the flour fractions of the malt. Each one of those sections can then be weighed, and we can turn it into a percentage, and that's the way that we get the correct percentage of each coarse, fine, and flour fractions. That's the way that we know that the malt mills are set up correctly. Okay, so as we will have done with our own malt mills, and this is a continual process, we've actually done trials with the Grainfather electric malt mill using our grist separation box on various different malts to get the crush settings correct for you to mill the malts at home. There'll be different settings for different types of grain, and this is because the grains aren't all the same size. This means you can't have one setting for all different malts. We've got 4 different grains. 3 of these are huskless grains, and one of them is Marisotta barley. So that's the biggest grain here, is the Marisotta. And then we move on to the wheat malt, which is a very plump, but not quite as plump as the Marisotta. And then on to rye, which is less plump again. And then even smaller is the spelt malt. So as you can see, if we were to put all of these through at the same setting, how much that malt is crushed would be totally different for each different grain. So we've run some trials using the Grainfather electric grain mill, and these are the required settings for various different malts. So if you're using a base malt, so we're looking at Pilsners, pale malts, Marisotta, all base malts, you're wanting setting number 6. For malts and grains that don't have a husk, so we're looking at wheat and rye, that would be setting number 4. For oat products, you're looking at setting number 3, and you can include dark malts and crystal malts in with the base malt, so that would also be a setting number 6. And do remember, this is on speed setting number 4. Now actually we ran 5 kilos of Warminster Marisotta through the Grainfather electric grain mill, and we've mashed it in a Grainfather. The wort was absolutely crystal clear within about 30 minutes of mashing. We ended up with 23 litres into the fermenter. That was actually at 1052, so that gives a efficiency of just over 80%. If you'd like to see some more content about the Grainfather electric grain mill, please check out our other videos. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.